कितने पैसे चाहिए?
पैसा नहीं, इज्जत। मोहल्ले के चिरकुट लौंडे हरा रहे हैं फैंटेसी स्पोर्ट्स में। आप एक्सपर्ट हो, सिखाओ।
सिखाऊंगा तो जाने दोगे? हाँ।
फैंटेसी स्पोर्ट्स का
असली अखाड़ा।
इस गेम में वित्तीय जोखिम के तत्व हैं और इसकी लत लग सकती है। कृपया जिम्मेदारी से और अपने जोखिम पर खेलें।
Hello and welcome to the Outside View live for the Sri Lanka versus India series. And Mohit, Shah and Annesha Ghosh have joined me for the post-match show. It was a disciplined performance from India. They restricted Sri Lanka quite well and won the match by 34 runs. Let's just dive into it straight away. Mohit, a very clinical performance from India, would you say?
Yeah, I would say fairly clinical. There are a couple of small things that they probably would want to address and improve on. But at the end of the day, I think they got a lot more positives out of this game rather than negatives. So I think they will be quite happy with how they performed, considering this is probably their first T20 game in almost 5-6 months. So on the whole, I think India will be pretty happy with their day's work today.
Talking about that, there was obviously the captaincy of Harmanpreet Kaur, quite proactive. She even used herself, changed bowlers from time to time, used Shafali Verma. We'll talk about that later in the show. But Annesha, how impressed were you for seeing Harmanpreet Kaur as a captain again?
Yeah, she was indeed very proactive on the field, and I think we got a bit of a glimpse into what mode mentally she may be entering into her captaincy during the Women's T20 Challenge, because those of us watched, or the world watched her operate with a higher degree of agency on the proceedings earlier in her international career as captain. She used to look a bit off color, a bit all over the place, but I think the Women's T20 Challenge, whenever we look back on Harmanpreet Kaur's career as captain, we have got to come back to the 2022 edition, even if we talk about her career 5 years down the line when she retires, because I think she's entered a phase in her captaincy where she is mentally ready for the challenge and wants to make a statement, wants to make a mark as captain, which I personally didn't see in several of her stints as India captain earlier, even. But something changed. The flick of the proverbial switch perhaps was in place, and here she was, quite aggressive in her captaincy choices, in her captaincy picks, and I'm glad she used as many as 7 bowlers, including Shafali Verma. She had spoken of utilizing Shafali Verma as a potential spin bowling option at the press conference ahead of the series as well. And good on her that Harmanpreet brought herself on as well. Though she was a bit unhappy with some of the lapses on the field, and I would have loved for even her to have given a bit of an opportunity to Jemima Rodrigues as well with the ball. That's probably one thing I was not quite happy with in terms of how she went about. Given the asking rate had gone out of Sri Lanka's reach, well into the well before the end overs, the final set of 5 began. So maybe there was a bit of an opportunity for her to try out Jemima Rodrigues, because look, the more the options, the merrier, because the Commonwealth Games are just around the corner.
And Jemima also is somebody who has been a regular bowling option when she captains Mumbai in the recent T20 tournament as well. She did quite well with the ball. So it could have been a good option, but let's talk about Jemima and her batting, because that is something that we always look out for. Like, it's so good to watch, and she's so good to watch today. She did carry the team. The team was under pressure when she came to bat. She carried the side, took it to the last over, and then obviously she smashed that last ball 6 also. Sometimes an innings like this can uplift a team's spirits and can make them believe. And I think the difference between say 120, 125 and 138, and obviously in those 15 runs, the way that the team chases also changes. Mohit, how crucial was Jemima's role today, and also what do you see her doing heading into the next T20 or the Commonwealth Games now that she's back? Whether she bats at number 5, number 4, what would your suggestion be?
Yeah, I think no amount of praise is enough for her, especially after today's performance, because she's probably one of the more scrutinized cricketers from India. There are always a lot of eyeballs on her, be it her selection or non-selection. It always makes the news. And as a young cricketer, she's still in her early 20s. Like, that is a lot of pressure. And I think she deals with pressure really well. Like, today, the situation she walked into was not ideal. Like, she came in when Shafali got dismissed. Harmanpreet was dismissed in the next over, and India were 58 for 4. When a team is at a score like that, you're in real danger of a collapse. And we've seen that happen a lot of times with India in the past. But today, what stood out about her was like the risk-free cricket she played, which is something we were talking about in the pre-show as well. That if you lose a few early wickets, you need to consolidate and at the same time maintain a decent scoring rate in T20s. Not a lot of people can do that in the Indian team or in the wider world, but Jemima does have that ability. Like, it's the smaller things that she gets right. Like, Inoka Ranvira was bowling really well today with her variations, getting some to turn, bowling the arm ball occasionally. But the way Jemima used the depth of the crease against a vastly experienced bowler like her, that deft touch that she showed by gliding the ball towards third man and getting boundaries, those are the kind of things that not a lot of players can do. And also her ability to float up and down the order. She's never batted at 5 for Mumbai, I think. Even in the Women's T20 Challenge, she's mostly batted in the top 3 or 4. So, really impressive of her to bat in a position where she's probably never batted before and to do so well.
Rightly said, and obviously, ever since we saw Jemima, we knew she's a talented batter, and she keeps on proving herself from time to time. Hope this is a beginning of a long stay for her in the Indian side, which has not been the case for the last 2 years. But moving ahead, we'd like to look at the scorecard once to see how Sri Lanka did. Sri Lankan captain Chamari Atawadu did not get a big knock going, and hence there was the issue with the batting. But Kavisha Dilhari was quite impressive with her 47 or 49 deliveries. There's nothing much to look at that scorecard. Sri Lanka will have to go back and start thinking. But let's have a look at the Indian scorecard also once. The bowling scorecard. 7 bowlers used by Harmanpreet Kaur, as Annesha rightly mentioned. Deepti Sharma started the proceedings. She got an early wicket in the power play. She did not bowl much after that. Radha Yadav bowled 4 overs, 2 for 22. Pooja Vassakar 1 for 13. A good, really good spell from her. And obviously there was Shafali who also got 1 wicket. Rajeshwari Gaikwad wasn't used that much. But let's talk about Radha Yadav, because I think in that whole scorecard, that's something that stands out for me. Also because how Radha wasn't doing that well heading into this series. Even in the Women's T20 Challenge, we saw her, Annesha, not doing that well. And she's a tough competitor. She always tries to put up a good performance. And she has been an important player for India previously in the T20 setup. So do you see how much confidence will this performance bring her?
Look, the fact that she was picked alongside Rajeshwari Gaikwad, it's not usual. Ever since Ekta Bisht has vacated the lead left-arm spin bowler's position in the Indian side, well, she hasn't been effectively picked, so to speak. I think the credit must go to Harmanpreet to a great extent. They have picked Radha Yadav alongside Rajeshwari Gaikwad. They could have easily gone for Poonam Yadav. I'm not too sure how Poonam Yadav has been bowling in the nets. Probably that's an indication that Harmanpreet doesn't really see or is not feeling too confident, very confident about utilizing Poonam Yadav as a frontline option. Radha Yadav did not have a great WBBL, mind you, and she was given an opportunity during the Challenger series, which too was a bit of a wobbly campaign for her for India C last year, and then we've seen her struggle. We've seen her lose the kind of the Midas touch she had. There was a run of 20 odd matches or even more when she picked at least 1 wicket in each T20I she played in. But here we saw a player which is very normal for any athlete to going through a lean patch as Radha Yadav has gone through. For velocity too, she was not amongst the wickets. I think she picked up just 1 or at the most 2 wickets in the Women's T20 Challenge in May. So here was a bit of a punt that Harmanpreet took on, who used to be quite a bit of a strike bowler for her, and she was phenomenal at the Women's T20 World Cup in Australia as well, especially against the game in the game against Sri Lanka, she was one of their standout performers. For her to have found a bit of form and taken those 2 wickets for just 22 runs, uh, took out Chamari Athapattu and Harshita Madhavi to inform batters, two of their top names in this particular game. I think it should give her a lot of confidence and also inject a lot of confidence in the Harmanpreet and the think tank, the leadership group, but also the selection committee because they too have must have been scratching their head as to what happened to one of their strike bowlers. So it should be a good sign for the entire Indian selection setup, the management, and for the playing party.
What Annesha had pointed out earlier today that the spin contingent of the Indian side hasn't done really well in the last few 6 months or a year or so. They've really struggled with the white ball. Heading into the Commonwealth Games and then the World Cup, obviously, we might not see India going so spin heavy as they were today. So, is Radha Yadav a better option than Rajeshwari Gaikwad in the T20 format? And should India also start thinking of horses for courses depending on the conditions, like say we are going to play in England and then the World Cup is in South Africa? So is Radha Yadav a better option than Rajeshwari Gaikwad?
That's
I
actually
think
a
on
very
that,
difficult.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually a very difficult question to answer because both of them have very different strengths. The thing about Rajeshwari is that she's a much more canny bowler, a much more skillful bowler. And more importantly, for a spinner, she has a lot of heart and courage. She's not afraid of flighting the ball. And she also has the ability to come back into spells. Like if you remember the World Cup game against Australia, she conceded 30 runs off her first 3 overs, but she then came back and only gave away 10 runs in the next 5 overs. And she's somebody who's done this repeatedly. Whereas with somebody like Radha Yadav, she's more of a confidence player. When she's doing well, she's unstoppable. When she's not doing well, she can sometimes go for a lot of runs, like we saw in the Women's T20 Challenge. She's also not helped by Deepti Sharma's captaincy there because if you're asking Radha Yadav to bowl to Deandra Doughton and Harmanpreet Kaur with a shorter boundary on the leg side, that's asking for trouble. The good thing about Radha Yadav and Sneh Rana, who's also around the Indian squad and rested for this series probably, is that both of them are willing to take up challenges and offer a lot in the field and with the bat as well. Whereas with somebody like Rajeshwari, she can't offer you a lot with the bat or in the field. So definitely horses for courses is something that India should consider. But I think both of them can probably be a part of India's first choice 11 in this format because Rajeshwari was India's leading wicket taker at the World Cup as well, bowled reasonably well in the senior women's T20 trophy. And yeah, like she probably is still India's best left arm spinner. So I think both of them should be a part of the playing 11.
Annesha, you want to add something to that?
No, I completely agree with what Mohit said about the advantage that Radha Yadav offers with her batting credentials. So that's going to be a big point of difference when it comes to choosing one of Radha Yadav or Rajeshwari Gaikwad. Should they be in great form, in rich vein of form, heading into the Commonwealth Games? Because on the one hand, you have the likes of Sophie Eccleston, who has reinvented herself into a bowling all-rounder that we see her today, hitting runs for fun, chipping in with great cameos. So if Radha Yadav can do something of that sort, I think it will only hold India in good stead in a major tournament like the Commonwealth Games.
And we've seen her do that. She can bat and she's done well in the domestic scene in the last 6 months or so with the bat from time to time. So that could be an option. But let's talk about Sri Lanka a bit. The batting display wasn't something that we can speak a lot about. But obviously what strikes me out is the batting performance from Kavisha Dilhari. Annesha, you did mention, and I think Mohit also mentioned about this in the pre-match show, that she's somebody who can really handle the stead of the team in the middle overs. How much were you impressed by the performance, firstly, and could she have done something different today that could have changed the outcome of the match in any way, you think?
To answer your second question first.
Mohit can take this one. I actually missed out.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. You can chip in with your opinion too. I think like Kavisha did her best today. Like probably her bowling is something that is still more of a work in progress, and bowling the 20th over against two powerful batters like Jemima and Deepthi isn't all that easy, but it's impressive that she did take on the responsibility to bowl that over firstly. And secondly, like I think she did really well with the bat today because she had a really tough time in the T20I series against Pakistan. I think she scored 7 runs in 3 matches. So it shows she played a lot better in the ODIs. But the impressive thing about Kavisha is that she has all the shots. She's good on the front foot, she's good on the back foot, can score both sides of the wicket. And she was also like, she got into the game early today because she was batting at number 4. In the Pakistan series, she wasn't always batting that high up. So I think she's definitely somebody who Sri Lanka should always bat in the top 4 and who has that ability to anchor the innings. And I think by the time she'd gotten in the asking rate, it pretty much gotten out of hand, and she tried her best, hit quite a few boundaries in the last 6 overs. So I don't think like there was any issues in terms of her approach today, and she's probably the biggest positive for Sri Lanka from the batting side of things in the last month or so.
Annesha, I guess you had an opinion or two about this as well, so can go away.
Sure. I mean, we've seen somebody like an Amelia Kerr rise the batting order in the New Zealand side. Something similar is happening here with Kavisha Dilhari as well. And credit to her, she looks to have put in the hard yards in the off season, has really worked on her batting because when she got those few opportunities in the early part of her innings, she would impress. But right now, she looks a more compact batter than she was maybe a year or so ago. She went through a bit of an up and down phase, because of a bit of a few injuries she faced. But right now, she looks a more confident batter. And of course, when you are dropped twice, that doesn't really help the opposition. It helps your confidence big time. So that those two reprieves she got also did a lot of good to her. But credit to her that she dug her heels in. What I particularly liked about her is she made sure she remained not out. And something I remember, from Mithali Raj's career, which so many of the youngsters in today's day and age, especially so much premium is put on the shortest format and scoring those big runs, quick runs, is if you make an endeavor to remain not out in matches like these and scenarios like these, it helps establish your credentials and it helps establish you in front of your before your fellow players, the think tank, that you have the caliber, you have the capability to play the anchor role should the correct opportunity arise, and should there be more support available, you can even take the team over the line. So I liked that aspect about Kavisha Dulhari's innings today really well, that she decided to play out the entire innings, ended on 47 or 49 unbeaten. So that was a really big positive to come out of that innings from Kavisha Dulhari today.
And here I also get an update that Jemima Rodriguez has been named the player of the match, quite rightly so for her batting display, which is quite good and got India to the score that they defended eventually. But let's talk about the second T20I and what do you expect from it? Firstly, let's talk about the conditions. Mohit, do you think the conditions for the second ODI T20 will be also very similar to this? And what did you make of the wicket in general?
Yeah, I think the conditions should be more or less similar because there's only 2 days between the two games and it's the same stadium and the same ground. So I don't think there should be too much of a difference in terms of the conditions. As for the wicket, I thought it was a fair wicket. It had enough in it for the bowlers as well as the batters. If you played good quality shots, you could get enough reward for it. While at the same time, there was a little bit of natural variation that was on offer for the spinners, especially, which didn't make batting very easy because sometimes the ball was turning, sometimes it wasn't turning. So I think the pitch made for really good quality cricket, and both the sides bowled pretty well, but there is a lot of scope for improvement in both teams batting. Like India would obviously want to lose fewer wickets in the power play and get off to better stats and probably take a little bit of time and the conditions into account before going for the big shots. And similarly, I think Sri Lanka, on the other hand, need to show some more impetus and initiative in the power play because that is where I felt they lost the match today because they lost like 3 wickets within the first 7 overs, including probably their two most informed batters, Chamari Atapattu and Harshita Madhvi. So those wickets really jolted them. And a lot of the Indian bowling and the power play was good, but not wicket taking. Like if you look at the balls which Radha Yadav bowled both to Harshita and Chamari, they were on the shorter side, and there were like, and the shot was on. It's just the execution which was lacking. So I think Sri Lanka had the right ideas, but they would want to probably focus a little more on their execution.
India's batting today was a little disappointing, as you mentioned rightly. There was a collapse, which we have come to see in the last few months. But what actually was, there was a stat during the game that kind of intrigued me, was Smriti Mandhana, who is such an elegant batter. We all know that. But her numbers against Sri Lanka in the T20 format is quite poor. She averages about 14 and strike rate of less than 100, if I'm not wrong. So Annesha, is there something that is, getting her out again and against Sri Lanka? Today also we saw she chipped one up. It was caught inside the circle. Is there something that is pegging her against Sri Lanka?
Yeah, that's something in cricketing terminology is known as off spinners, especially Sri Lankan off spinners. We did speak a lot about how Shashikala Sirivardhane made her life difficult during one of the earlier tours, India's earlier tours of Sri Lanka. And here, Oshadi Ranasinghe stepped up on this occasion and really did not let her off the hook, so to speak. Smriti has struggled against off spin. She has tried to, make amends against the likes of Ashley Gardner, but it still remains a bit of a shortcoming in her ever-growing repertoire, her ever-growing stature as a world-class batter. So that's something for her to work on. Probably it's more here than with the bat. If that is overcome, I'm pretty sure Smriti Mandhana will be more fluent, more effective, and more prolific, not just against Sri Lanka, but the breed of off spinners in particular. But Oshadi Ranasinghe, I'm pretty sure she's going to come into the second T20I high on confidence, because Mandhana is one of India's premier batters, and for her to have gotten out pretty much playing that clueless shot, not sure what she was really playing for, I think it should put Oshadi Ranasinghe on a bit of a higher plane than Mandhana as far as the confidence levels are concerned.
Speaking of which, the Indian batting, again, we spoke about the Indian batting in lengths, but Sri Lanka's bowling today was quite good, if you have to say. But what differently should the approach be in terms of their batting? Because Mohit, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, even in the Pakistan series, they got similar kind of scores. It just seems that their batting is struggling to, as I had previously spoken, get big totals. What do you think they should do against a quality bowling unit which India has?
Yeah, I think they need to focus on rotating the strike a lot better, because I think they played out a lot of dot balls in the power play. And I get it that like not all their players are capable of finding the boundary regularly or capable of hitting the big sixes like someone like Chamari Atapattu can. So there are a few limitations which their batters have. So they need to like find a way to work with those limitations, because it's not always easy to get boundaries regularly against a high class attack. But they probably need to work a little more on finding the gaps with more regularity, using the crease a little better against the spinners, be it in terms of stepping out or playing off the back foot. So I think, and one of their batters needs to bat out the 20 overs, because this is a team which is very top heavy. So you need one of Chamari, Harshita, or Kavisha to bat for most of the 20 overs, because there are not a lot of players who can like play the 20 overs and also score at a decent rate in the Sri Lankan team. They really would want Chamari Atapattu and Harshita to step up and take that responsibility of batting deep into the innings.
Is that an option for both of them to start opening the innings together? Because Chamari is already opening. Is that an option for Sri Lanka, Annesha?
I wouldn't want to make, have knee-jerk changes come into effect, especially given this was just the first match. They have gone in with a new opener. We did not have Hasani Pereira open this time around, as was the case in the Pakistan to her. So, it would be fair on both teams to stick to the playing 11s they fielded today. I know S. Meghna, for example, got out on a duck today, but it makes all the sense for Harmanpreet to back her player, back her number three, back S. Meghna at number 3, number 4. And the same applies to Chamara Yatapatu, sticking to the fielders, sticking to the personnel she opted for today, and give them a bit of a long rope, at least a couple of games, and see how things pan out. And for somebody like Kavisha Dilhari, we know she's performing well in that number 4, number 5 role. So might as well stick to that. And once she grows more in confidence, this is one of the more formidable bowling attacks she's facing in Pakistan as well. As Mohit rightly alluded to earlier, she wasn't amongst the runs to a great extent, but obviously the Indian attack holds great reputation. So hopefully she will be able to grow into this role of a key middle order cog. And once that happens, once that is has taken effect, I think she can be given a bit of a promotion, but it should be only considered much later and not ahead of the Commonwealth Games, in my opinion.
That brings us to the end of this show. The first T20I went to India's way, and the series is pretty much set up now for Sri Lanka to have a chance to have a win in this series. They would need to come back stronger in the next game, and that's on 25th. So stay tuned to Women's Cricket Zone for all of the updates on women's cricket, and we'll join you for the pre-match show for the second T20I on 25th of June. I would like to thank my experts today, and we'll see you soon again.
ये पक्का
अब सीख तो गए, अब तो जाने दो मुझे।
ठहर जाइए, कोई प्रॉब्लम हो गई तो कहाँ ढूंढेंगे आपको?
फैंटेसी अखाड़ा का 24/7 कस्टमर सर्विस है, आपकी प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करवा देंगे।
कल जाने देंगे।
फैंटेसी स्पोर्ट्स का असली अखाड़ा।
इस गेम में वित्तीय जोखिम के तत्व हैं और इसकी लत लग सकती है। कृपया जिम्मेदारी से और अपने जोखिम पर खेलें।